The morning started like any other Tuesday on Earth. Jake Morrison was drinking his coffee in the command center of the Pacific Defense Station when the first alarm went off. He had been a captain in the Earth Defense Force for 12 years, and most of those years had been quiet. Earth was a small planet in a corner of the galaxy that nobody cared about. The screens around him lit up with red warnings. Something was coming through space toward Earth, something big. Jake put down his coffee and walked to the main display. The radar showed objects moving faster than anything humans had ever built. They were coming from beyond the solar system. "Sir, we're getting readings from all over the planet," said Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez from her station. Her voice was steady, but Jake could hear the worry in it. "Whatever these things are, there are thousands of them." Jake nodded and pressed the button for the emergency channel. "This is Captain Morrison to all Earth defense stations. We have unknown contacts approaching from deep space. All units to battle stations." The response came back from bases all around the world. New York, London, Tokyo, Sydney, everyone was seeing the same thing. The objects were slowing down as they got closer to Earth. They were not meteors or space rocks. They were controlled. They were ships. Amy looked up from her screen. "Sir, I'm getting energy readings unlike anything in our databases. These ships are using some kind of power source we don't understand." Jake felt a cold feeling in his stomach. Humanity had always wondered if they were alone in the universe. Now they were about to find out, and Jake had a bad feeling about what they would discover. The first ships entered Earth's atmosphere over Asia. The people of New Shanghai looked up at the sky and saw dark shapes floating down like storm clouds. The ships were huge, bigger than any building in the city. They moved without making any sound, casting shadows that seemed darker than normal shadows should be. Dr. Elena Vasquez was in her laboratory at the university when the ships appeared. She was a scientist who studied life forms, and she had spent years wondering what alien life might look like. When she saw the ships through her window, she knew that whatever was inside them was not going to be friendly. The ships stopped moving when they were 100 feet above the ground. For a moment, everything was quiet. People in the streets looked up and waited. Then the bottoms of the ships opened, and hell came pouring out. The creatures that fell from the ships were like nothing from Earth's worst nightmares. They stood 7 feet tall and were covered in black scales that seemed to drink in the light. Their eyes glowed red in faces that looked like they had been carved from stone by someone who hated all living things. They had claws instead of hands, and their mouths were full of teeth that were too long and too sharp. But the worst part was not how they looked. The worst part was how they made people feel. When a human looked at one of these creatures, fear hit them like a physical blow. It was not normal fear. It was the kind of fear that made people forget how to move, how to breathe, how to think. In New Shanghai, people tried to run when they saw the creatures, but the fear was too strong. Most people just stood there, shaking, unable to move. The creatures moved through the crowds like they were walking through a field of flowers, taking their time, enjoying what they were doing. Amy was watching the satellite feeds from her station. She saw the creatures moving through the city, and she saw what happened to the people who could not run. The creatures did not kill quickly. They seemed to feed on human fear and pain, growing stronger with each scream. "My God," Amy whispered, "what are these things?" Jake was asking the same question. The Earth Defense Force had weapons that could level mountains, but somehow he knew that normal weapons would not work on these creatures. They moved like they were not fully part of the physical world. They were something else, something that should not exist. The creatures spread out from the landing sites like a plague. They moved through New Shanghai, then through the smaller cities around it. Wherever they went, they left silence behind. Not the silence of death, but the silence of things that were worse than death. Dr. Vasquez was trying to understand what was happening. She had equipment that could analyze any life form on Earth, but when she pointed it at the creatures, the machines gave her readings that made no sense. The creatures were alive, but they were also something else. They existed in this world, but they came from somewhere else. The first military response came from the Chinese Defense Force, they sent tanks and helicopters to fight the creatures. Jake watched the battle on his screens and felt sick. The weapons that could destroy buildings barely scratched the creatures. Worse, when the soldiers got close to the creatures, they became paralyzed with fear. Many of them just sat in their tanks, unable to move, while the creatures tore through the metal like paper. Similar scenes played out all over the world. The creatures had landed in dozens of cities: London, Moscow, Cairo, Mexico City. Everywhere they went, the same thing happened. Humans tried to fight, but the fear was too strong. The creatures seemed to know exactly how to make humans helpless. Jake tried to coordinate the global response, but it was like trying to fight smoke. Every time the military thought they had found a way to hurt the creatures adapted. They learned from each battle and became harder to fight. Amy brought in reports from around the world. The creatures were not just randomly attacking. They were following a plan. They hit military bases first, then government buildings, then hospitals and schools. They knew exactly how to break human society. "Sir," Amy said, "we're getting reports that the creatures are multiplying. Every time they feed on human fear, there seem to be more of them." Jake felt the weight of the situation settling on his shoulders. In 6 hours, the creatures had taken control of major cities on every continent. The Earth Defense Force was supposed to protect humanity, but they were fighting an enemy that seemed impossible to defeat. Dr. Vasquez was working frantically in her lab, trying to find some weakness in the creatures. She had managed to get samples of their scales and blood from a destroyed creature, but nothing she found gave her hope. The creatures were designed to be perfect predators of human beings. The worst part was the psychological effect. Jake could see it in his own people. Even the soldiers who had not directly faced the creatures were becoming afraid. The fear was spreading like a virus through radio reports and video feeds. People were learning to be afraid of something they had never seen. As the day went on, the situation became worse. The creatures had taken New Shanghai completely. They controlled the government buildings, the military bases, and the airports. Anyone who tried to escape was caught by creatures that seemed to appear from nowhere. The same thing was happening in dozens of cities around the world. The creatures moved like they had done this before, like they had conquered other worlds. In the same way, they were not just invaders. They were specialists in breaking civilizations. Jake looked at the global map on his screen. Red zones marked the areas where the creatures had taken control. In 12 hours, they had conquered territory that should have taken months to capture. At this rate, they would control the entire planet in 3 days. "Amy," he said quietly, "send out the evacuation orders. Tell everyone to get to the underground shelters. We need to figure out how to fight these things before there's nothing left to fight for." Amy nodded and started sending the orders. But both of them knew that hiding underground would only delay the inevitable. The creatures had brought hell to Earth, and so far, humanity had no answer for it. 3 weeks had passed since the creatures first fell from the sky. The world that Jake Morrison had known was gone. Most of the major cities were under the control of the dark beings that people had started calling demons. The creatures moved through the ruins of civilization like they owned the place. And in many ways, they did. Jake sat in the underground command center in Colorado, deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. The bunker had been built during the old Cold War, designed to survive nuclear attacks. Now it served as one of the last strongholds of human resistance. The walls were thick concrete and steel, but Jake wondered if they would be enough to keep the demons out. Dr. Elena Vasquez had been working without sleep for days. Her laboratory was now a cramped room filled with equipment that hummed and beeped constantly. She had been studying the demons, trying to find some weakness that humanity could use. What she had found was disturbing, but it might also be the key to survival. "Jake, you need to see this," Elena said, looking up from her microscope. Her eyes were red from exhaustion, but there was something else in them now. Something that had not been there before. Jake walked over to her workstation. The screens showed images of human brain tissue, but these were not normal scans. The brain cells were different, changed in ways that Elena was still trying to understand. "I've been studying the survivors," Elena explained. "The people who managed to escape direct contact with the demons, their brains are changing. Not physically, but chemically. They're producing compounds that we've never seen before." Jake frowned. "What kind of compounds?" "I'm not sure yet," Elena admitted, "but I think they're related to fear response. When humans are exposed to the demons' psychological attacks, something in their brains adapts. It's like the brain is learning to fight back." In the ruins of Detroit, Sergeant Rick Chun was leading his squad through the empty streets. They had been fighting the demons for 18 hours straight, moving from building to building, trying to rescue survivors. Rick had lost half his men in the first week of the invasion, but the ones who remained were different now. Rick stopped at a street corner and held up his hand. His squad froze behind him. They could hear the sound of claws on concrete, the soft, scraping noise that meant demons were nearby. 3 weeks ago, that sound would have filled Rick with terror. Now it just made him angry. "There," whispered Private Lisa Murphy, pointing to a shadow moving between 2 burned-out cars. "I count." 3 of them, Rick nodded. Lisa had developed an ability to spot demons from a distance. She could see them even when they were trying to hide. More importantly, she could look at them without feeling the crushing fear that had paralyzed most humans during the first days of the invasion. The demons moved toward the squad, their red eyes glowing in the darkness. They were confident, as they had been for weeks. They expected the humans to freeze with terror, to become helpless prey. Instead, Rick and his team raised their weapons and opened fire. The bullets still did not do much damage to the demons' thick scales. But something was different. The creatures seemed surprised. They had expected the humans to be paralyzed with fear, but instead the humans were fighting back with cold, calculated precision. "Movement on the left," Lisa called out. She had spotted a 4th demon trying to flank them. Rick turned and threw a grenade toward the creature. The explosion sent the demon tumbling backward. Its black scales cracked and bleeding. The demons retreated, something Rick had never seen them do before. They disappeared into the shadows, but Rick knew they would be back. They always came back. But now, for the first time, the humans were not running away. Back in the command center, Jake was receiving reports from resistance cells around the world. The news was still bad, but there were small signs of hope. Human casualties were slowing down. Not because people were hiding better, but because they were learning to fight. Amy Rodriguez was coordinating communications from different resistance groups. She had been working with Jake since the beginning, and he had watched her change over the past 3 weeks. The fear was still there, but it was mixed with something else now. Something harder. "Sir, we're getting reports from London," Amy said. "The resistance there says they've had success using close combat tactics. The demons seem less effective when humans get close to them." Jake nodded. They had been hearing similar reports from other groups. The demons were powerful, but they were not invincible. Humans were learning their weaknesses, adapting their tactics, finding ways to fight back. Dr. Vasquez appeared at Jake's shoulder. "I think I know what's happening," she said. "The brain scans show that humans are developing immunity to the demon's fear effects. But it's more than that. The brain chemistry changes are making people more aggressive, more focused. It's like the human brain is turning into a weapon." In a subway tunnel beneath New York, Commander Alex Turner was leading a group of survivors toward a safe zone. The tunnels were dark and filled with the smell of decay, but they were also one of the few places where humans could move without being seen by the demons. Alex had been a police officer before the invasion. He had seen plenty of violence in his career, but nothing had prepared him for the demons. In the first days, he had been as paralyzed by fear as everyone else. Now, 3 weeks later, he felt different. The fear was still there, but it was controlled, focused into something useful. "Contact ahead," whispered Detective Maria Santos. She had been a police detective in Los Angeles before the world ended. Now she was one of Alex's most trusted fighters. She had developed an almost supernatural ability to sense when demons were near, the group stopped moving. Alex could feel it too now, the presence of something that did not belong in the normal world. But instead of the crushing terror he had felt 3 weeks ago, he felt something else. He felt hungry. Hungry to fight back, to hurt the things that had destroyed his world. 2 demons emerged from a side tunnel, their claws scraping against the concrete walls. They moved with the confidence of predators who had never met anything that could threaten them. They expected the humans to cower, to beg, to provide the fear that the demons fed on. Instead, Alex and his team attacked. They moved with coordinated precision, using tactics they had learned through weeks of desperate fighting. Maria threw a Molotov cocktail at the first demon while Alex and 2 other fighters attacked the second one with improvised spears. The demons were caught off guard. They had been expecting prey, not predators. The fire from Maria's bottle spread across the first demon's scales, and Alex's spear found a gap in the second demon's armor. Both creatures retreated, making sounds that might have been surprise. Or pain. They're learning to be afraid of us, Maria said quietly. There was something in her voice that Alex had never heard before. Something that sounded almost like satisfaction. Back in Colorado, Dr. Vasquez was analyzing the latest samples from the field teams. The changes in human brain chemistry were accelerating. The survivors were not just adapting to the demon's psychological attacks, they were evolving beyond them. "Jake, look at this," she said, pointing to a brain scan on her screen. "This is from one of Rick's soldiers. The fear response is almost completely gone. Instead, the brain is producing chemicals that enhance aggression, focus, and tactical thinking." Jake studied the scan. "Is this permanent?" "I think so," Elena replied. "The brain is rewiring itself. The people who survive direct contact with the demons are becoming something new. Something that doesn't feel fear the way normal humans do." Reports continued to come in from around the world. A resistance cell in Berlin had successfully ambushed a group of demons. Fighters in Tokyo had driven demons out of an entire district. In Sydney, humans had begun hunting demons instead of hiding from them. The demons were still winning the war, but they were no longer winning every battle. Humanity was learning, adapting, evolving. The creatures that had conquered dozens of worlds were facing something they had never encountered before. They were facing prey that was becoming predators. Jake looked at the global map on his screen. The red zones were still there, marking the areas under demon control. But now there were also green zones, small pockets where humans had fought back. Successfully, the green zones were growing. "Amy," Jake said, "send a message to all resistance cells. Tell them that the demons can be hurt. Tell them that humans are learning to fight back. Tell them that we're not going to lose this war." Amy nodded and started sending the message. For the first time in 3 weeks, there was hope in the underground command center. The demons had brought hell to Earth, but humanity was discovering that they could bring something back. The alien commanders of the Covenant of Silence had made their decision. The humans were becoming too dangerous. What should have been a simple conquest was turning into a nightmare. The demons that had terrorized the galaxy for thousands of years were being hunted to extinction by creatures that should have been easy prey, high above Earth. In the massive command ship that hung like a black moon in space, the Covenant leaders gathered around their war table. They were tall, gray beings with 6 arms and eyes that glowed with cold intelligence. They had conquered 1,000 worlds using the demons, and they had never failed before. "The humans have eliminated 60% of our demon forces," reported Commander Vexthal, his voice like grinding metal. "They are not just resisting, they are hunting our warriors." The other commanders shifted uncomfortably. They had expected Earth to fall in 3 days. It had been 3 months, and now they were losing demons faster than they could replace them? "We will open the Great Gateway," announced Supreme Commander Zarketh. "We will flood this world with every demon from the nightmare dimension. The humans cannot fight what they cannot understand." The Great Gateway was the Covenant's ultimate weapon. It was a permanent portal to Kethmorin, the dimension where the demons came from. Once opened, it would pour unlimited numbers of demons onto Earth. No world had ever survived the Great Gateway. On Earth, Colonel Ben Parker was leading a team of human soldiers through the ruins of Chicago. Ben had been a Marine before the invasion, but the man who walked through the destroyed city was something different. His eyes were cold and calculating, and he moved with the deadly grace of a predator. The humans had learned to track demons through their dimensional rifts. They could follow the creatures back to their staging areas and destroy them before they could attack human settlements. Ben's team had killed over 300 demons in the past month alone. "Movement ahead," whispered Staff Sergeant Chloe Wright. She was crouched behind a pile of rubble, her rifle trained on a shimmering patch of air. The demons always created small tears in reality when they traveled between dimensions. Humans had learned to see these tears and use them. Ben nodded and signaled his team to spread out. They had developed tactics that no military school had ever taught. They fought like pack hunters, using teamwork and intelligence to bring down creatures that were individually much stronger than any human. The tear in the air widened, and 3 demons stepped through. They were the large ones, the kind that had terrified entire cities in the early days of the invasion. Now they looked around nervously, as if they expected to be attacked. They were right to be nervous. Ben's team struck from 4 directions at once. They used weapons that had been modified with demon technology, spears that could pierce demon scales, and explosives that burned with dimensional fire. The demons tried to fight back, but they were outnumbered and outmaneuvered. 2 of the demons died quickly. The 3rd one tried to escape back through the dimensional tier, but Chloe was faster. She threw a modified grenade through the portal before it could close. The explosion on the other side sent shockwaves through the dimensional fabric. "Sir," Chloe said, studying her scanner, "that explosion opened up something bigger." "I'm reading." "A massive dimensional breach forming over the city." Ben looked up at the sky. The air above Chicago was twisting and turning, forming a spiral of darkness that seemed to go on forever. This was not like the small portals that individual demons used. This was something much larger. "All units, fall back to safe distance." Ben ordered over his radio. "We have a major dimensional event in progress." The Great Gateway tore open above Earth like a wound in reality. It was a mile wide and filled with swirling darkness. The alien commanders watched from their ship as unlimited numbers of demons began pouring through the portal. This time, there would be no escape for the humans. Dr. Elena Vasquez was in her laboratory when the alarms started screaming. Her screens showed the massive portal opening above Chicago, and the readings were unlike anything she had ever seen. The dimensional breach was so large that it was affecting the fabric of space itself. "Jake, you need to see this," she called to Captain Morrison, who was coordinating the global response to the new threat. "This isn't just a bigger invasion. They've opened a permanent gateway to the demon dimension." Jake studied the readings on Elena's screens. The portal was stable and growing larger. Demons were pouring through it in numbers that made the first invasion look small. But there was something else in the readings that caught his attention. "Elena, is that portal 2-way?" he asked. Elena checked her instruments. "Yes, it should." "B. Dimensional gateways work both ways unless they're specifically designed not to." "Why?" Jake felt a cold smile spreading across his face. It was the kind of smile that would have terrified him 3 months ago. Now it felt natural. "Because if demons can come through to our world, we can go through to theirs." The decision to enter the demon dimension was not made by any government or military leader. It was made by the humans who had been changed by months of fighting demons. They had become something new, something that did not think like normal humans anymore. Ben Parker was the first to volunteer. His team had been studying the dimensional portals for weeks, learning how they worked and how to use them. When the Great Gateway opened, they saw it not as a threat but as an opportunity. "We're going through," Ben announced to his team. "We're going to take the fight to them." Chloe Wright nodded. She had been expecting this moment. The humans had learned everything they could about fighting demons on Earth. Now it was time to see what the demon dimension looked like. Ben's team prepared for the mission with the same cold efficiency that had made them successful demon hunters. They carried weapons that had been modified with demon technology, supplies that could sustain them in an alien environment, and equipment that could keep them in contact with Earth. The portal was a swirling mass of darkness that seemed to pull at their minds. Normal humans would have been terrified to approach it, but Ben's team had stopped being normal humans months ago. They walked toward the portal with the confidence of predators, entering new hunting grounds. The demon dimension was worse than the worst human nightmare. The sky was the color of dried blood, and the ground was covered with bones from creatures that had died in unimaginable pain. The air itself seemed to scream with the voices of the tormented, but Ben and his team did not run, they did not hide. They studied their surroundings with the cool analysis of soldiers in hostile territory. They had come here to hunt, and they were going to hunt. The demons they encountered in their own dimension were different from the ones that had invaded Earth. These were the original demons, the ones that had been created in the nightmare dimension. They were larger, stronger, and more terrible than anything that had come to Earth. They were also unprepared for what humanity had become. The demons of Kethmoran had spent eternity terrorizing other creatures, feeding on their fear and pain. They had never encountered anything that could look at them without flinching, anything that could study their weaknesses and exploit them. Ben's team moved through the demon dimension like a disease spreading through a healthy body. They killed every demon they encountered, using tactics that turned the creature's own strengths against them. They were efficient, relentless, and completely without mercy. Back on Earth, more human teams were entering the portal. Dr. Vasquez had developed equipment that could track the teams inside the demon dimension and provide them with support. What she saw in the readings amazed and terrified her. The humans were not just surviving in the demon dimension. They were conquering it. They were moving through the nightmare realm like it was just another battlefield, setting up bases, establishing supply lines, and systematically exterminating every demon they found. "Jake," Elena said, staring at her screens, "they're not just fighting the demons. They're colonizing the demon dimension. They're turning it into a human territory." Jake nodded. He had expected this. The humans who had been changed by the invasion were not satisfied with just defending Earth. They wanted to eliminate the threat completely, and that meant taking the war to the enemy's home ground. Reports came in from the teams inside the demon dimension. They had found the structures where demons were created, the nightmare factories that had been producing terror for thousands of years. The humans were destroying them one by one, using demon technology against its creators. The Covenant commanders watched their screens in growing horror. The Great Gateway was supposed to end the human problem. Instead, it had given the humans access to the source of demon power. The nightmare dimension that had been their greatest weapon was being turned into a human stronghold. "Seal the portal," ordered Supreme Commander Zarkith. "Seal it now before they can establish a permanent presence." But it was too late. The humans had learned to manipulate dimensional technology. They had taken control of the portal from the inside, making it impossible for the Covenant to close it. The gateway that was meant to destroy Earth had become a bridge for human expansion. The demons were no longer pouring through the portal. Instead, something else was coming through. 6 months had passed since the demons first fell from the sky. The galaxy was no longer the same place it had been before humanity entered the war. The Covenant of Silence, which had ruled the stars for 3,000 years, was falling apart. Their greatest weapon had become their greatest enemy. Admiral Susan Blake stood on the bridge of the Earthship, Vengeance, as it moved through space toward the Covenant home system. The ship had been built using technology taken from the demon dimension, powered by energies that had once fueled nightmares. Now it served humanity's expansion across the galaxy. Susan had been a naval officer before the invasion. The woman who commanded the first human fleet to leave the solar system was something different. Her eyes held the cold intelligence of a predator, and her voice carried the authority of someone who had learned to command in the worst conditions imaginable. "Approaching the Covenant capital system," reported Navigation Officer Danny Rogers. Long-range sensors show massive defensive installations around the primary planet. Susan nodded. The Covenant had pulled back their forces from across the galaxy to defend their homeworld. They knew that humanity was coming, and they were preparing for the final battle. What they did not understand was that the battle had already been decided months ago. On the planet below, the Covenant leaders were meeting in emergency session. Their great council chamber had been built to inspire awe and fear in conquered species. Now it felt like a tomb waiting to be filled. "Report from the outer colonies," announced Commander Vextel, his 6 arms trembling as he spoke. "The humans have reached the Andorian sector. They have eliminated all demon forces in 17 systems." Supreme Commander Zarkith stared at the holographic display that showed the galaxy. Red markers indicated systems under human control. There were hundreds of them now, spreading out from Earth like a virus consuming healthy tissue. "How is this possible?" demanded another commander. "We have ruled the galaxy for millennia. We have weapons that can destroy entire solar systems." Zarkith knew the answer, though he did not want to speak it aloud. The humans had become something that the Covenant had never encountered before. They were a species that specialized in turning horror into a weapon that could adapt to any threat and become something worse than the threat itself. Back on Earth, Dr. Elena Vasquez was completing her final research report. Her laboratory was now part of a vast complex dedicated to understanding what humanity had become. The findings were disturbing, even to the people who had lived through the transformation. "The genetic changes are permanent," Elena explained. To a gathering of scientists and military leaders, the humans who survived direct contact with the demons have been fundamentally altered. Their brain chemistry, their psychological responses, their basic survival instincts have all evolved. Captain Jake Morrison, now promoted to general, listened to the report with mixed feelings. He had watched his species change from peaceful explorers to something that frightened the galaxy's oldest civilizations. Part of him wondered if they had saved humanity or destroyed it. "What exactly have we become?" Jake asked. Elena paused before answering. "We have become the galaxy's apex predator." When faced with supernatural horror, the human brain activated dormant genetic programs that turned us into specialized hunters of terrifying things. We are no longer the same species that existed before the invasion. In the Covenant capital system, the defensive battle was beginning. The alien fleet had weapons that could crack planets and shields that could stop starlight. They had ships that had never been defeated in 3,000 years of conquest. The human fleet was smaller, but it moved with a precision that made the Covenant admirals nervous. The humans had learned to fight by studying their enemies, adapting their tactics, and turning every weakness into a weapon. They had learned these skills by hunting demons, and now they were using them against the demons' masters, Admiral Susan. Blake watched the Covenant formation on her tactical display. "All ships, begin the hunt," she ordered. The human ships moved like pack predators, coordinating their attacks with the same deadly efficiency that had made them successful in the demon dimension. They did not fight like a traditional fleet. They fought like hunters bringing down dangerous prey. The Covenant ships were more powerful individually, but the humans fought as a unified organism. When one human ship was damaged, the others adapted to cover its weaknesses. When the Covenant tried to use their superior firepower, the humans scattered and reformed in patterns that turned the alien strength against them. General Craig Foster led the ground assault on the Covenant capital world. His Marines moved through the alien city with the same cold professionalism that had served them in the demon dimension. They were no longer human soldiers in any traditional sense. They were something new, something designed by evolution to hunt things that should not exist. The Covenant civilians tried to flee as the humans advanced through their city, but there was nowhere to run. The humans had learned to track their prey across dimensions, through space, and now through the corridors of an alien civilization. Craig's forces moved with surgical precision. They targeted the command centers, the communication hubs, and the power stations that kept the Covenant civilization running. They did not kill randomly or out of anger. They killed with the efficiency of predators eliminating a threat to their territory. The Covenant defenders fought desperately, using weapons that had conquered 1,000 worlds. But they were fighting an enemy that had evolved specifically to hunt supernatural horrors. The humans adapted to every weapon, learned from every tactic, and became more dangerous with each battle. In the Great Council Chamber, Supreme Commander Zarketh made his final transmission to the remaining Covenant forces scattered across the galaxy. "The humans are not a normal species," he announced. "They are something that should not exist in a civilized galaxy. They have become the predator that feeds on predators." The transmission was cut short as human soldiers entered the chamber. Craig Foster walked up to the Covenant leaders with the calm confidence of someone who had never doubted the outcome of this battle. "Your species used terror as a weapon for 3,000 years, Craig said, his voice cold and empty of emotion. "You created demons to torture innocent worlds. Now you will face judgment." Zarketh looked into Craig's eyes and saw something that made his alien heart freeze with fear. He saw the gaze of a creature that had learned to hunt nightmares, that had evolved beyond normal predation into something that specialized in destroying things that destroyed others. The Covenant of Silence ended not with a great battle or a heroic last stand, but with the systematic elimination of a civilization that had ruled through fear. The humans did not offer terms of surrender or negotiate for peace. They simply removed a threat from the galaxy with the same efficiency they had used to hunt demons. Back on Earth, children in schools were learning about the time when aliens brought demons to their world. The teachers told them how humanity had responded by becoming something worse than demons, something that could hunt and eliminate any threat to human survival. Dr. Vasquez completed her final report on human evolution. "We are no longer the species that first looked up at the stars and wondered if we were alone," she wrote. "We have become the answer to that question for every other species in the galaxy. We are the hunters that hunt the hunters, the predators that prey on predators." Jake Morrison, now the commander of human forces across the galaxy, stood in his office looking out at the stars. Humanity had spread to hundreds of worlds, bringing order to a galaxy that had been ruled by fear and terror. For millennia, the humans had eliminated every species that used supernatural horror as a weapon. They had hunted down the creators of the demons, the builders of nightmare dimensions, and the civilizations that had tortured other worlds for entertainment. The galaxy was at peace for the first time in thousands of years, but it was the peace of a forest where the apex predator had established its territory. Other species could live and grow and explore the stars, but they did so under the protection and watchful eyes of humanity. Amy Rodriguez, now an admiral in the human fleet, sent the final report to Earth. "Mission complete. The galaxy has been cleansed of all species that use terror as a weapon. Humanity has established itself as the dominant force in this spiral arm. The aliens had brought hell to Earth, expecting to add another world to their collection of conquered civilizations. Instead, they had awakened something that the galaxy had never seen before. They had turned a species of peaceful explorers into the ultimate predators, creatures that specialized in hunting things that hunted others. Humanity had brought something worse than hell to the galaxy. They had brought themselves. 10 years had passed since the last Covenant world fell to human forces. The galaxy was a different place now, quieter and more peaceful than it had been in thousands of years. But peace, the humans had learned, was not the same thing as safety, Commander. Lisa Murphy stood on the observation deck of the human monitoring station orbiting the planet Zarian Prime. She had been one of the first humans to develop the ability to sense demons during the invasion. Now she used those same enhanced senses to watch over the galaxy's newest inhabitants. Below her, the surface of Zarian Prime was covered with cities built by the Zephyrians, a species of bird-like aliens who had been slaves under the Covenant. For 2,000 years, they had been freed when humanity destroyed their masters, but freedom had not been easy for them to understand. "Report from the surface," said Lieutenant Danny Rogers, who had served with Lisa since the early days of the war. "The Zephyrians are adapting well to self-governance. No signs of the old fear-based control systems, Lisa nodded. The Zephyrians were one of dozens of species that humanity now protected. They had all been slaves or victims of the Covenant's terror-based empire. Now they were learning to live without constant fear, under the protection of their former fellow victims. But protection was a complex thing when the protectors were apex predators. On Earth, Dr. Elena Vasquez was working in her new laboratory, a facility that had been built to study the long-term effects of humanity's evolution. The findings were troubling, even 10 years after the war had ended. The genetic changes are spreading to the general population, Elena reported to the Global Council, humanity's governing body. Children born after the invasion show signs of the same psychological adaptations that appeared in the combat veterans. General Jake Morrison, now the head of Human Defense Command, listened to the report with growing concern. Are you saying that all humans are becoming like the soldiers who fought the demons? Not exactly, Elena replied. But the capacity is there? The genetic programs that turned our soldiers into predators are now part of the human genome. Any human child could develop these abilities if exposed to the right stimuli. This was the question that kept human leaders awake at night. They had become the galaxy's protectors, but they were also the galaxy's most dangerous species. The same evolution that had saved humanity from the demons had created something that could never be unchanged. On the planet New Babylon, Admiral Susan Blake was meeting with representatives from the Free Worlds Alliance, a coalition of species that had been liberated from Covenant rule. The meeting was supposed to be about trade agreements and mutual defense, but Susan could see the fear in the aliens' eyes. The humans have kept their word, said Ambassador Kethver, a tall insectoid being who spoke for the Mantid Collective. They have protected us from the remaining demon cults and the Covenant survivors. But we must ask, who protects us from the humans? It was a fair question, and Susan knew it. Humanity had become so effective at hunting predators that they had eliminated every species in the galaxy that posed a threat. But that same effectiveness made them terrifying to the species they protected. We protect ourselves, Susan replied. We have laws, ethics, and codes of conduct. We are not the monsters that the Covenant were. But even as she spoke, Susan knew that the aliens' fear was rational. Humans had evolved into something that could kill demons and destroy civilizations. The fact that they chose not to use that power indiscriminately was their only guarantee of peaceful coexistence. In the Outer Rim territories, Captain Ben Parker was leading a patrol mission through the ruins of the old Covenant stronghold on Kepler 442b. The planet had been abandoned for years, but recent sensor readings suggested that something was moving in the underground tunnels. Ben's team moved through the alien ruins with the same predatory grace that had made them successful. Demon hunters. They had all been changed by the war, turned into something that was no longer quite human. The question was whether that change had been worth the cost. Movement in Tunnel 7, reported Staff Sergeant Chloe Wright. Energy readings consistent with dimensional technology. Ben felt his enhanced senses sharpen. Somewhere in the darkness ahead, something that did not belong in normal space was waiting. His body began producing the chemical cocktail that had once helped him hunt demons. The predator was waking up. They found the source of the disturbance in a chamber deep beneath the ruins. A group of young aliens from various species were gathered around a device that looked like a miniature version of the Great Gateway. They were trying to open a portal to the demon dimension. Step away from the device, Ben ordered, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had learned to command in the worst conditions imaginable. The young aliens looked up at him with a mixture of fear and defiance. They were members of what human intelligence called the Darkness Cult, beings who had been so traumatized by the Covenant's rule that they sought to bring back the demons as a form of rebellion against their human protectors. You do not understand, said one of the aliens, a young Zephyrian whose feathers were dyed black. You humans have made the galaxy boring. You have removed all the danger, all the excitement. We want to bring back the old ways. Ben stared at the alien with the cold gaze of a predator examining prey. You want to bring back the demons? We want to bring back something that can challenge your supremacy, the alien replied. You have made yourselves the rulers of the galaxy through fear, just like the Covenant did. Ben felt the familiar surge of predatory instincts. These aliens wanted to unleash supernatural horror on the galaxy again, wanted to bring back the nightmares that had terrorized countless worlds. They saw the demons not as monsters to be destroyed, but as weapons to be used against humanity. Chloe, Ben said quietly, secure the device. These aliens have made their choice. The Darkness cult members tried to activate the portal, but they were too slow. Ben's team moved with the efficiency of apex predators, disabling the device and restraining the cultists before they could complete their work. But the incident raised questions that human leadership could not ignore. If some aliens preferred the chaos of the old galaxy to the peace of human protection, what did that say about the future of galactic civilization? Back on Earth, the Global Council was debating the same question. Representative Maria Santos, who had been a demon hunter during the war, spoke for the military faction. We eliminated the Covenant because they used terror as a weapon, she said. Now we have aliens who want to bring terror back because they think our protection is too restrictive. What are we supposed to do with them? The question divided human society. Some believed that humanity should continue to protect all species, even those that did not want protection. Others argued that any species that sought to bring back supernatural horror should be eliminated as a threat to galactic peace. Dr. Elena Vasquez provided the scientific perspective. We have to remember what we have become, she said. We are not the same species that first encountered the demons. We have evolved into something that specializes in hunting and destroying threats. The question is whether we can choose not to use that evolution. The debate continued for months. Some humans argued that they had a responsibility to protect all life in the galaxy, regardless of whether that life appreciated the protection. Others maintained that humanity's first duty was to prevent the return of supernatural horror, even if that meant eliminating species that actively sought to bring it back. The answer came from an unexpected source. Admiral Craig Foster, who had led the final assault on the Covenant capital, proposed a solution that reflected humanity's evolution. We give them what they want, he said. We establish a quarantine zone in the Outer Rim where any species that prefers chaos to order can, according to their own rules, but we make it clear that if they try to bring their chaos beyond the quarantine zone, they will face the consequences. The Chaos Zone, as it came to be known, became home to species that could not adapt to peaceful coexistence. They were free to fight among themselves, to practice their old ways of terror and domination. As long as they did not threaten the protected worlds, humanity patrolled the borders of the Chaos Zone with the same efficiency they had once used to hunt demons. Any attempt to spread supernatural horror beyond the quarantine was met with swift and decisive action. The galaxy had found a new equilibrium. Most species lived under human protection, enjoying peace and prosperity that had not existed for thousands of years. A few species chose to live in the chaos they preferred, contained in their own corner of space. And humanity continued to evolve, becoming better at their role as the galaxy's apex predators. They were no longer the species that had first looked up at the stars with wonder. They had become something designed by evolution to hunt the hunters, to prey on the predators, to ensure that terror would never again be used as a weapon of conquest. The aliens had brought hell to Earth, expecting to add another world to their empire of fear. Instead, they had awakened something that would reshape the galaxy according to its own vision of order. They had brought hell, but humanity had brought something worse. They had brought themselves.